Hello, good morning, and a very warm welcome to HDR's Talk of the Town. As always, so lovely to see familiar smiling faces in the audience, close industry acquaintances, Sophie and Alex from Holistic, Lee Mallet, thank you for making an appearance, and wonderful Joanna Sade, whom I met at a rather soggy MIPIM this year. Absolutely super to have you here in our London office on such a pretty, if cold, spring morning. My name is Farah, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Director for the Global Building Engineering Services Group here at HDR. Before we learn more about our thought piece, Stranded Assets and the Flight to Quality, I would like to share a potted history about our speaker. Alex Dunn was born and raised in Harrogate, North Yorkshire, a very beautiful part of the United Kingdom. Alex aspired to be an architect like his grandfather, yet despite gaining A's and B's in other subjects, he received a rather disappointing grade D in GCSE art. That's really sad. He was hugely disappointed, and this set him on a trajectory to be an engineer instead. Alex confided that he feels that his art was misunderstood. Alex told his school careers officer that he wanted to become a building services engineer, and she was, of course, completely oblivious to this profession. And all she said to him was, "Well done, and carry on." Alex was accepted at University of Nottingham and studied building environment engineering, a combination of mechanical engineering and architecture. He graduated in 2000 and moved to Bristol. Alex initially worked for Hawley in Bristol for 6 years. In his final 2 years, he met his now wife and they moved to Bath. Despite being from Iceland, Alex's wife thought that Bath was too small and too quiet. Alex was persuaded to move to London in 2006, despite thinking it was a nice place to visit at the weekend. However, too loud, too fast, polluted, and expensive to actually live in. Quickly, he realised that London is actually a fun place to live and work. Alex worked on Tottenham Court Road and then in King's Cross with Hawley. He was working on the Marble Arch House development for British Land when he had an interview with, then, Hurley Palmer Flat in British Land's headquarters, York House. Alex was attracted to work for Hurley Palmer Flat as the company had started to work on Principal Place in Shoreditch. He went on to collaborate with Foster's and Partner on the 49-storey luxury apartment and adjacent buildings. Alex learned that whatever he drew, it was never considered beautiful enough. Maybe his GCSE art teacher was right after all. Fast forward to 2019, HDR acquired Hurley Palmer Flat, and we are now part of a global company with over 13,000 employees worldwide. We have learnt to respell words such as colour and repronounce aluminium as aluminum. This has also meant that Alex has been able to work on a diverse range of international projects, including transportation and mission critical, such as data centres and hospitals. In his spare time, Alex is a taxi driver for his 2 children, Asia, 15, and Elias, 10. When Alex gets time off for good behaviour, he likes to play and watch football, go mountain biking, see live music, theatre, and the cinema. Alex has an interest in architecture and sustainability. He loves the history of London and how our great city has evolved over the years to be the diverse place we all experience today. Alex enjoys good quality and responsible design and how this has a positive impact on our daily lives. Through his fantastic portfolio of projects, including 125 Broad Street for Hammerson, One New Change for Landsec, Principal Tower for Brookfield Properties, Wembley Park for Quintain, and Holbein Gardens for Grosvenor, Alex has a true wealth of talent and technical experience and passion for sustainability, which enables him to apply and share his knowledge with clients and colleagues alike. Alex has been truly wonderful to collaborate with, taking on board all of our direction, our feedback. line by line rehearsals and writing of the script. So without further ado, I am really very happy to introduce the hugely talented Alex Dunn. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Farah, for that kind introduction. And so to my talk. As we are all aware, the real-life consequences of climate change are increasingly prevalent as global temperatures and instances of extreme heat, rainfall, drought, and sea levels rise. Many of you will have seen recent reports which confirm that 2024 was the hottest year on record. Governments across the world need to implement policies and take action at speed to protect the future of people and the planet. I do passionately believe our collective actions can make a meaningful difference. However, intelligent solutions are coming to market every day to help reduce our negative impact on the planet. One area in which we can make a significant difference is within the built environment, given that buildings account for almost 40% of global carbon emissions. We know more today about the environment and the consequences of our actions on how we design, construct, and operate our buildings. Thankfully, we have access to increasingly sophisticated technologies. With the right support and collaborative approach, our industry can potentially lead the way to decarbonisation. We all recognise that while regulations demand action, the focus on compliance can, at times, stifle progress. However, we all acknowledge that in some ways regulations have set a base minimum for what must be delivered, creating a design for compliance culture rather than one which champions best practice. Identifying performance gaps between design intent, such as anticipated carbon emissions and running costs, versus the building's actual operational output has driven a shift towards performance-led approaches such as NABERS, LEED and Science Based Targets Initiative. It's so encouraging that we're now collaborating with Enlighten clients, some of whom are in the audience this morning, who prefer to aim for the higher performance targets and not just the baseline. Next, I'd like to provide some background to our energy consumption awareness. In the 1970s, the UK faced a severe energy shortage, prompting the government to implement a 3-day working week to conserve energy. Some of you in the audience may have been young children and recall your parents lighting candles. The first UK building regulations to include the conservation of fuel and power came into being in 1972 as a direct result of this energy shortage. California's Title 24 also introduced this policy initiative in response to the 1970s energy crisis and was amongst the first building energy codes to mandate energy efficiency standards for new construction. The Building Regulations 1979 set minimum insulation levels for the very first time. Small improvements were made to these regulations over time, such as the introduction of Part L in 2002 building regulations, which introduced stricter energy efficiency standards for both new and existing buildings, focusing on reducing fuel consumption and carbon emissions. Graduating in 2000, I found it was my profession, the M&E engineer, and our energy and sustainability colleagues who championed low carbon design and energy efficiency measures. The items were not high up on the agenda for the rest of the project team, much less so was the awareness of embodied carbon in existing buildings. The development of UK building regulations and growing emphasis on BREEAM certification drove progress in decarbonising buildings. Media traction around global warming moved to widespread public discourse about what came to be known as climate change, and the term sustainability entered the mainstream. Al Gore's 2006 documentary, An Inconvenient Truth, raised further awareness. By the 2010s, climate change had become a widely acknowledged issue and brought about even greater recognition that climate change is indeed the greatest threat to humanity. COP21 in Paris was a significant milestone which established a legally binding framework, with participating countries setting a 2050 net zero target, known as the Paris Agreement. This target was backed by the Science Based Targets Initiative, which was launched in 2015 to support companies in their efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. That same year, the regulatory landscape continued to develop with the introduction of minimum energy efficiency standards. BREEAM and LEED standards were becoming more stringent. Discussions about buildings were moving from energy efficiency to decarbonisation. From 2020, the 1.5 degree temperature target began to feel increasingly challenging. Natural disasters made the headlines, and concerns over offsetting emissions as a primary route to decarbonation gained pace, as discussed by my colleague Steve Bonnet in our last Talk of the Town. The COVID-19 pandemic triggered a profound shift in how we use buildings, with the move to remote and hybrid working. In April 2020, daily carbon emissions dropped by 17%, with reduced occupancy in public and commercial buildings being a significant contributing factor to this temporary dip. At the same time, the rise of e-commerce over traditional high street shopping impacted the use of commercial space, with operational demands driving significant changes in energy consumption. With reduced demand for commercial property and increasing pressure from net zero targets, sustainability considerations started to become essential for property owners to sell or lease their buildings. Another critical factor which has influenced the world in recent years has been Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the energy crisis which has ensued. The volatility of global events has highlighted society's continued dependence on the fossil fuel market. Having a dedicated environmental, social and governance ESG policy has become commonplace. Most large organisations have nominated an individual to be responsible for energy performance and sustainability. The rise of terms like greenwashing has pushed large corporations and governmental bodies towards more genuine, transparent and measurable sustainability efforts. Next, I'd like to discuss energy performance certificates. Many of you in the audience will recall energy performance certificates, commonly known as EPCs, were launched in 2007 and fully implemented in 2008. An EPC indicates the energy efficiency of a building, banded from A to G, where A is the most efficient in terms of fuel costs and carbon dioxide emissions. In 2018, the minimum energy efficiency standards came into force. This required all commercial properties being let or sold in England and Wales to have a minimum EPC rating of E or above. These rules were originally brought in by the UK to implement an EU directive. MEES remains even though the UK has left the European Union. Importantly, all commercial rented properties must achieve an EPC rating by 2027 and B by 2030. Properties are required to have a current EPC for the entire time they are let. Data suggests approximately 10% of commercial properties have an F or a G rating. Many of you will be familiar with the ongoing debate within our industry and more recently in wider media as to whether energy performance certificates are fit for purpose. The government led on a consultation in December 2024 to seek views on the energy performance of buildings framework. The consultation is now closed and, as always, we wait in eager anticipation of the findings. Stepping back, it should be noted that industrial and commercial buildings contribute to over a third of London's emissions, representing a significant opportunity in our effort to make London a net zero city. Notwithstanding political ideology, the opposition leader Kemi Badenoch recently said it was impossible for the UK to meet its net zero target by 2050 without a serious drop in our living standards or by bankrupting the country. The UK is legally committed to reaching net zero by 2050 under a law passed in 2019. This means the UK must cut carbon emissions until the country removes as much as it produces, in line with the 2015 Paris Agreement. As we all are aware, disappointingly, the UK is not on track to meet its fourth and fifth carbon budgets and desperately needs to tackle emissions from buildings. The fourth budget covers the period from 2023 to 27, with an emissions cap of 1,950 megatons of CO2, which is a 52% reduction on 1990 level. Next, I'd like to discuss stranded assets and the flight to quality. Recent data shows that demand for sustainable office building has been the main driver of office take-up in the city this year, with over half of lettings in buildings with excellent or outstanding environmental ratings. The City of London Corporation approved a record number of retrofit planning applications in 2023, which accounted for half of all permissions granted across London. The flight to quality has seen energy-efficient and well-being focused buildings attracting Grade A rents. Approximately 17% of office tenants in London are looking to downsize, according to Savills. Data suggests that while the market as a whole may be ticking along, the trend is to smaller, higher quality buildings. Savills estimates that most spaces will require improvements costing £40 per square foot. Developers will have the business case to invest in smart building tech, which will be a core component of the project. This provides opportunities to facilitate new service-based relationships, green leases, and reduce overall operating costs. Occupiers and landlords alike are exploring managed space options to unlock greater flexibility and efficiency. Occupiers aim to swiftly adapt to changing business needs and create engaging work environments, while landlords look to attract a diverse tenant base and maximise asset utilisation. Managed spaces are self-contained, including rent, business rate, service charges, IT, cleaning, utilities, furniture and fit-out. These spaces are customisable in design and branding and come with flexible term lengths. Here in London, and indeed across cities worldwide, we recognise the global plans for these desirable workspaces. Retrofitting in isolation is not enough to get an existing building to net zero. Improving building performance is a lifetime process, requiring continuous monitoring and tracking to ensure retrofit investments continue to deliver as expected, preventing operational drift and keeping the building on track towards zero carbon goals. Next, I'd like to present sustainability in practice. Grosvenor's UK property business recently announced a retrofit milestone, 1 million square feet in the capital earlier this year. We've been collaborating with forward-thinking developers such as Grosvenor, who in 2023 committed to reduce its carbon emissions in line with limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees. We started work on 27 Eccleston Place, also known as the Ice Factory for Grosvenor, in October 2017. The Ice Factory is a repurposed industrial warehouse in Eccleston Yards near to Victoria Station. Originally built during the 19th century, the warehouse was home to Shingleton's Ice Company. Over 2 centuries, the building's been adapted as a coachworks, power station, and a motor repair centre. Spanning 5 floors, including a fitness studio, 3 floors of office space, and rooftop Michelin-starred restaurant, including an all-electric kitchen, a first for the operator. Ice Factory was completed prior to the launch of Grosvenor's overarching sustainability strategy. Notably, this project paved the way for this client's vision in alignment with circular economy principles, waste hierarchy, and the maximisation of building material retention and reuse. Another of our adaptive reuse projects with Grosvenor is Newson's Yard. Formerly the oldest continuously operating timber yard in the UK, this was originally built in the 1840s by John Newson, a renowned London builder. The historic site withstood a fire in 1877 and the impact of the Blitz between 1940 and 1941. Throughout the years, Newson's Yards evolved into part of the Pimlico Road Design District. We created 11,000 square feet of retail space, as well as an extension of the residential provision from 5 to 9 units. The yard itself is accessible through 2 arcades from Pimlico Road and sits under a glass roof. This has been designed to be a creative meeting place, doubling as a venue for community events, and therefore required a variety of special considerations from an engineering perspective. We introduced 2 modes of ventilation: natural ventilation, in which air enters from the arcade entrance and subsequently dissipates through the roof, or is extracted by an air handling unit. Natural ventilation is prioritised, with the choice of mode being controlled via the BMS and depending on a variety of factors, such as occupancy levels or the weather. In October 2019, we began work on Holbein Gardens, also for Grosvenor. 7 Holbein Place was a tired office building constructed in the 1980s adjacent to Sloane Square Station. Our client was conscious of the risk of a stranded asset. Grosvenor considered multiple development options, including demolition, overbuilding, refurbishment, and extension. The client settled on refurbishment with extension utilising low-carbon materials. We created a 25,000 square foot highly sustainable and flexible workplace. Retention and repurposing of the facade saved 39% of embodied carbon compared to that of all new products. 99.95% of strip-out waste was diverted from landfill and 98% of the full scheme. A significant biodiversity gain's been achieved. Beneath the terrace decking is a blue roof system capturing rainwater. We needed to limit surface water outflow to the sewer, so we treated and stored the rainwater in a harvesting tank in the basement, which supplies the irrigation system, supporting the landscaping, green walls, and roof planting. Cross-laminated timber has been used to create new floors designed for reuse and disassembly with low embodied carbon alongside reclaimed steelwork and floor tiles. A new rooftop terrace provides panoramic views of London's skyline. We interfaced new windows with a roof-mounted weather station via the BMS to facilitate natural ventilation. Local displays indicate optimum environmental conditions for office workers to open the windows, as well as reduce electricity consumption through lower reliance on mechanical systems. We designed circadian lighting on the office floors, which works in harmony with the human body clock, modulating the intensity, spectrum, and colour of electric lighting in harmony with the natural lighting cycle. This should improve occupant comfort and productivity and create a healthy visual environment and experience. There may also be a psychological benefit to shifting the colour temperature as it reinforces a connection to the outdoors. Even with these sustainability interventions, the building was outturning an EPC B. We undertook an exercise to understand the options available to upgrade this to an A rating. The design team identified a low-cost upgrade to achieve the required rating. The project aligns to NABERS methodology with operational energy intensity less than 80 kilowatt hours per square metre per year. Overall, the tenant should save 50% on energy costs compared to typical London offices. The building achieved BREEAM Outstanding, WELL Gold and WiredScore Gold certifications. Holbein Gardens acted as a LETI pioneer project with the whole life carbon assessment demonstrating upfront embodied carbon of 300 kilograms of CO2 per square metre, which is less than LETI's 2030 upfront carbon target of 350. Net zero has been achieved in accordance with UK Green Building Council's Net Zero Carbon Building Framework. Holbein Gardens was awarded for advancing industry knowledge of steel reuse in buildings by the Institution of Structural Engineers. In 2024, Holbein Gardens were shortlisted at the BCO Regional Awards. I'm delighted to have collaborated on such a pioneering project, and equally delighted to some of the project team are here in the audience this morning. Next, I'd like to promote Retrofit First. Taking the lead, the Architects Journal launched Retro First in September 2019. Since then, several local councils, including the City, Westminster, Camden and Bath and North East Somerset, have developed and adopted retrofit first policies in support of their net zero targets and declarations of climate emergency. Whilst we're advocating a retrofit first approach, some of you may recall the high profile case of Marks & Spencer's Marble Arch store on Oxford Street, providing a lucid example of retrofit versus redevelopment. Orchard House was built in the late 1920s. M&S opened its Art Deco style store in 1930. Fast forward to 2021 when M&S applied to Westminster City Council for permission to demolish Orchard House. The proposal for the redevelopment includes a 9-storey building housing retail, cafe, gym and offices. The redevelopment has been slowed by court cases and opposition from heritage and sustainability experts, culminating in the former Communities Secretary Michael Gove launching an inquiry before eventually refusing planning permission in July 2023. However, the High Court ruled that Michael Gove had misinterpreted the National Planning Policy Framework and erred in law. M&S was finally granted permission to demolish and redevelop its flagship London store in December 2024, ending a 3-year planning battle. At the forefront of London's fight against climate change, the City of London Corporation has adopted a retrofit-first approach as part of a climate action strategy to reach net zero by 2040. Juggling the need to achieve both net zero and accommodate the provision of 1.2 million square metres of commercial floor space, the city has sought to strike a balance between an uplift in floor space and the associated embodied carbon emissions. This has resulted in a number of office-led refurbishment schemes retaining at least 50% by mass of the existing building superstructure and other building fabric which would have previously been demolished. The Draft City Plan 2040 prioritises retrofitting of existing buildings, leading to the establishment of a retrofit fast track for office development. It's our understanding the City of London is projecting 80% of London's building stock will continue to exist by 2050, and as such, retrofit has a significant role to play. Adopted in February 2025, the Supplementary Planning Document, SPD, provides a framework for how to approach the City of London's climate resilience policies and how to achieve good practice design and construction through the following 5 themes. Number 1, retrofit and reuse. This can range from light retrofit to deep retrofit with extension. Retrofit within the city must retain and reuse at least 50% of the existing building superstructure by mass. 2, greenhouse gas emissions and energy use. Reduces whole life carbon emissions through development, construction and day-to-day operation. Neighbours UK focuses on operational energy use, with office development needing to achieve a rating of 5 stars for new buildings and 4 stars for retrofit projects. Number 3, circular economy principles. Encourages a shift from a linear to circular waste model in a building's construction and operation to minimise waste through a building's life cycle. The city is targeting zero construction and operation waste through the adoption of a long life, loose fit and low energy approach both to existing and new buildings and associated materials. 4, climate resilience. Specific climate resilience principles should be considered during REBA stages 1 to 3, including how developments address flood risk and water management, building and urban overheating, pest and disease control, and infrastructure resilience. And 5, urban greening and biodiversity. Sets out how to protect, conserve and enhance biodiversity, habitats and green infrastructure in both open spaces and on buildings. Whilst the majority of existing buildings within the city will fall into an exemption, the city is set to introduce a policy requirement for all major developments to target a score of 3 biodiversity units per hectare. The new SPD demonstrates that retrofit projects will be heavily favoured in the planning process. We followed retrofit first on our City Tower project. Citigroup's EMEA headquarters in Canary Wharf provides 170,000 square metres, which is 1.8 million square feet of floor space across 2 merged buildings, 33 Canada Square, known as CGC1, and 25 Canada Square, known as CGC2, for its 9,000 UK-based staff. The buildings were separated in 2023 prior to the refurbishment of 25 Canada Square. 25 Canada Square stands at a statuesque 200 metres and upon its construction in 2001 became the second tallest building in the UK. Citibank acquired the 42-storey tower from its landlord in 2019 for £1.2 billion. Being asked by a client to create a sustainable and unique working environment that promotes well-being and collaboration as well as value is challenge enough. However, when the canvas for the project in his existing 42-storey tower, a wealth of other challenges arise, yet alongside these come opportunities. The concept of vertical communities was developed by Wilkinson Eyre in response to both the existing building and the brief from Citibank at competition stage, centring on opening up the building and dissolving the existing layers through the creation of hubs across multiple interconnected floors. The design of these spaces focuses around the principles of people, place and time. This strategy not only integrates similar business functions together, encouraging collaboration and forcing spaces to work much harder, it also provides an opportunity to break the rhythm of the tower at the bottom, middle and top, with accessible amenity spaces for staff and visitors, blurring the distinction between workspace and amenity space. The vision is one where workers are no longer confined to desks and the user experience is significantly enhanced and more outward-looking. However, cutting large holes in existing buildings creates inherent problems, including concerns around fire protection and escape, structural impacts, and construction logistics. Removing floor area has to be justified, and the value added, unique, flexible, contemporary workspace, outweighing any perceived loss on returns. This is particularly relevant at the 3 key intervention points at the top, middle, and bottom of the tower. Still working within the existing framework of the building, changes are visible on the external canvas of the tower that reinforce bold interventions. Most prominent are the stunning triple-height winter gardens that sit above the existing plant room floors and the elegant internal gardens at the top of the tower, which have been created by infilling underutilised external terraces. These unique and calm spaces, 41 stories above ground, will boast some of the best views around London. Without doubt, retrofit of tall buildings of this scale will become the norm across the globe. As I begin to wrap up my thoughts and cast an eye over the geopolitical climate we're currently experiencing, it's interesting to note that the US government recently announced a retreat from ESG principles. This has been followed by an investor in BP endorsing a return to fossil fuel production. In stark contrast, the People's Pension has withdrawn £28 billion from State Street, a US asset manager, and reinvested with a focus on balancing strong financial performance with responsible investment principles. Closer to home here in the UK, the National Grid has been net zero for 59 days during 2025. At the time of writing, Great Britain's energy mix is 24% gas, 22% solar, 18% wind, 17% imports, 11% nuclear and 8% biomass. This is equivalent to 51% zero carbon. As energy efficient buildings command premium values, commercial properties achieve 5 to 10% higher rental values, while residential properties gain 3 to 5% in value on average. This helps the viability of green buildings. Increasingly, owner-occupiers and tenants are willing to invest and occupy buildings with greener credentials. Retrofits can reduce energy consumption between 30 to 50%, decreasing vulnerability to price volatility and generating substantial operational savings. As Farah and I were finalising the talk last week, Tony Blair rather helpfully decided to make a contribution to our talk. Sadly, climate change has become a political hot potato. Whilst we recognise the legitimacy of challenging the effectiveness of policy, the danger of politicising climate change has the potential to derail the trajectory to net zero. I would like to encourage us all to collaborate and through collective action reduce the environmental impact of construction and operation of buildings. Through considering low carbon strategies as well as health and well-being early on in the design process, the experience of occupants can be improved with access to outdoor terraces, daylight, minimisation of pollutants and enhanced thermal comfort. In addition, providing data in a user-friendly format can help and engage landlords and tenants in the efficient and effective operation of their workplaces. Looking ahead to the future, whilst the challenge of climate change can seem insurmountable, I believe that through a combination of knowledge sharing, incremental improvement, enlightened policymakers and clients who are willing to invest in greener buildings, as an industry we can make a meaningful difference to help mitigate the impact of our behaviour on the environment. I'd like to conclude with a quote from David Attenborough. The fact is that no species has ever had such wholesale control over everything on Earth, living or dead, as we have now. That lays upon us, whether we like it or not, an awesome responsibility. In our hands now lies not only our own future, but that of all living creatures with whom we share the Earth. Thank you for your time this morning.
So, first of all, well done, Alex. A huge canter through in 30 minutes of all of the discourse that we have surrounding the road to net zero, and many of us in the audience today will obviously be very familiar with the conversations that are going on within our own offices and with the own corporate agenda as well that our companies are seeking to follow. I would like to start by asking somebody in the audience who will kindly raise his hand and start the conversation going. Benoit from Related Argent, would you like to start the ball rolling, please?
Thank you, Alex. So you mentioned that in order to achieve net zero, we need clients to be willing to invest in greener building. That's a fact, yes. You mentioned a figure of £40 per square foot in terms of retrofit to put all these measures in place to help improve the EPC of a building. Do you see that coming down? Because it's quite a high figure, and some of the data you've shown is probably very valid in the city, in Zone 1, in Canary Wharf. As soon as you've got offices outside of this zone or King's Cross, seeing a significant increase in rent is not there yet. So I just want to have your view more probably on the technical side, saying if we do more and more of this, would we expect to see the cost of doing these kind of mitigation measure decreasing, basically?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, I think there's a balance between doing visible stuff that you can show to the tenants, and then the heavy lifting stuff, which is kind of maybe not so visible. So sort of doing the sort of thermal envelope improvements and things like that, if you're a developer, has a big impact. Things like technology is coming down in price in terms of software that can sort of display data and show usage trends. On Holbein, we used Reclaim floor tiles rather than new ones, and I don't think the price was that different between the two. So I think once you get over that, it's not as once they're cleaned, it's not as shiny as a new one. I don't think the delta was that much different. They were lucky that they had a site in Bermondsey to get Reclaim steelwork, so they put that through Cleveland Steel, which was checked for quality and refurbished and brought to site. And so I think there will be like a premium for that, but that really helped with the embodied carbon. But in terms of like M&E systems, then the stuff that we do is coming down in price, obviously subject to sort of global volatility in the market, but generally speaking, sort of the IT-based solutions are getting cheaper.
We know that certain industries like pharma and data centres take up a lot of energy. How are we going to manage the increase of energy demands by those kind of industries?
Good question. I mean, we're working with one of the biggest software companies in the world. We see what they're doing is they use an enormous amount of power, but they also use it in a very efficient way. So they've moved away from cooling the spaces to cooling the racks themselves. So they have in-rack cooling, and so they're only doing about 20% via the air system. So they have got sophisticated technologies to reduce the electricity requirements of their sites, but it's the data, the racks that are driving it. So the AI data centers are so dense in their power usage, then that heat has to be got rid of. There is like planning policy about taking that heat and putting it into a district heating network. So we looked at the viability of that because it's producing 24/7. But it's a key challenge because of all these big providers on their sort of hyperscale sites using a lot of power. So.
Thank you, Alex. It was fantastic to have a canter through that, even though we all know it's fantastic to see it laid out in front of us to remind us where we've come from. You mentioned very briefly in one of the buildings the UK Net Zero Carbon Building Standard, which was launched last September. You know, there's quite a few sort of clients who've been involved. I think Related Argent particularly have had a hand in that. Of course, it's new. It's not a certification, but it's a standard. Can you see that? How do you see that sort of contributing, and how the take up of it, and how we might all use that to as a tool to move this agenda forward?
I think it's a massive advancement in terms of understanding of building operation. And so lots of good work sort of being put into it by the likes of David Partridge and Julie Godfrey and people like that. So, I mean, when we were doing Holbein, we struggled with methodologies because we had sort of Letty doing their really valuable work. We had Neighbours, which was based in Australia, and then during the design process, it was taken on by the BRE and then subsequently to CIBSE. So we were trying to align with that. And then there was, we were just running the reports of sustainability by TFT. They were looking at that side of things. And so they were trying to then align to these frameworks. So I think it's good that it's published, it's out there. They did some very good like introductory talks on it. And I think it will continue to evolve as they receive data from buildings in operation. And I think we'll see more and more use of it.
Just going back to your earlier point about the cost per square foot of the refurb, you also talked about a significant reduction in energy use and given the high cost of energy right now, presumably the payback period is going to be also reduced purely down to the reduction in energy.
Yeah, and I think so. People looked at capital costs a lot closer when, as you say, now because of the price of fuel, then it becomes a bigger factor in the payback calculation. I mean, I understand the price of electricity is set based on the price of gas, and so they're sort of inherently linked in the sort of UK grid. And if that can be decoupled, then I think that will kind of help sort of more transparency. But I mean, certainly, when a heat pump's doing sort of 3 units of heat to 1 unit of electricity, there's big wins in, having your showers done by heat pump and looking to minimise wherever you can, and where you can't, do it in a really efficient way and recover heat as much as possible.
So you could be recouping that £40 within 5 or 6 years, do you think?
It's a low-hanging fruit. So if you go into an office that's got fluorescent lighting and you replace it with LED lighting, there's a big win there. So it's I think if you tackle them in order, then, as you say, you can have a really good benefit for without having to spend huge amounts on sort of technology.
I was lucky enough to be stuck up a mountain when there was an enormous power cut across the entire Spain last week. And interestingly, some of the reports after that talked about the fact that renewable energy might be a cause of it. And I just wondered, to what extent does that impact the UK, if it indeed is even true? And to what extent do we need to mitigate buildings to deal with fluctuations around renewable energy generation?
It's a really good question. I mean, I didn't know that in Spain. I think like a couple of years ago in London, there was an outage, which doesn't happen often on the grid, and it lasted for whether it was like an hour or two. And supposedly it was because of wind turbines off the east coast of Norfolk that the wind dropped, they unloaded, and then it dropped a connector out. And so as we increase the renewables mix with the solar and the wind contributions, it's something that the grid has to really think about in terms of resilience and which technologies can be used in those events. I mean, in data centers, they have battery storage and generators which are moving from diesel to biofuel, but they're still sort of generators, so that they cover those events in a sort of loss of continuity way. But for the average building, it's something that the national grid sort of will be considering all the time.
I think with Spain as well, Sophie, we also saw on the BBC, because Alex and I were talking about this, because there were so many events as we were during sort of the tour, and on the BBC they showed a graph which showed the renewable energies being generated, and then another line where it was still generated from fossil fuel, and then there was a glitch. It's really technical, but something happened where one of the connectors failed, and so that dropped in renewables and the drop in fossil fuel. So it's all on the BBC and you can watch it. It's fascinating and such a good and relevant question. But the synopsis from the BBC commentator was that it's something for all of us to be looking at as we increasingly divert towards renewable energies. I think somebody just put a hand up.
So, and sorry, just jumping on the back of that, there's a free app. I think it's like NESO, and you can sort of download that, and it shows you the mix on any given day, and it really does change. So it's surprising. You look out the window, it's sunny, you think, oh, solar's going to be really high, and it might be the wind that's sort of driving it. But and then that percentage net zero is going up and down every day, but the days that it's net zero are sort of increasing as we go forward.
I've been attending recently the British Property Federation's TechFasts. They've had a group of professionals looking at data mainly has emerged as one of the biggest problems facing the industry. The cost of assembling the relevant data and then picking the right data points to look at. I'm just wondering what your view is on the difficulties around standardizing data by which we measure all of these issues.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big issue because, a BMS, for example, can generate sort of tens of thousands of data points. And you go, okay, I've got all of this. first thing is it needs to be validated. It needs to be accurate so that whatever the BMS is telling us is the thing that's actually happening. And then it's then what you do with that data to analyse it and sort of filter it. And so like we were encouraging on Holbein to have a screen in reception that's got simple graphs. Today you're using this much power, yesterday you use this is up or down, to try to put it across in a way that can engage people, because there's so much information out there, but then you come across FM teams that suddenly say, oh, I just mute the alarm when that happens, or oh, that's just the way that thing runs. And in sort of each intervention, when you go into the building, you have to kind of try to establish a new sort of baseline to go, what's going on at the moment? You know, on one tower in the city, we found that the pumps weren't ramping down, so that was like a big energy saving already, because they were just sort of flat out. So I think it's you can do like the sort of troubleshooting, and then it's then analysing it, and then picking the bits that you need, the important bits that need to be looked at, and then sort of displaying it in a way that people understand and can take action on.
A well-commissioned building obviously makes the efficiency and the load of the building work that bit more efficiently. Do you think we're losing the opportunity to get value out of seasonal commissioning, and we should be focusing more on seasonal optimization?
Yeah, absolutely. Like when we're looking at sort of neighbours and the operational energy, it goes into such a level of detail, whereas you're not just looking at the lighting and the heating and cooling systems, you're looking at all the ancillary loads and the parasitic loads and what they contribute, because by themselves they might be small, but they add up to a reasonable amount. And having a building that has a heating system that's optimised for the coldest day in winter and the hottest day in summer means it can deal with those circumstances, but actually the building's operating at part load for the majority of the year. So sort of looking at scenarios where like you have several months at a time to go, how can we optimise the operation in those, could have like real benefits. So I'd really encourage it.
And I think, just to sum up, what we've all learned and what we keep seeing is that how our industry is indeed at the forefront of making a significant difference and investment in terms of retrofit, and I think that can only be laudable and just to be commended.